Hi, this is Ricki Spencer and welcome to another episode of Quests by Community. And today we are speaking with Garry White. Garry White is an incredible human being from our LGBTIQA+ community. Garry has worked in many spaces over the years and he's currently a very passionate committee member for Housing for the Aged Action Group for our LGBTIQ communities across Victoria. And we're going to get to know a bit about Garry's past. Welcome, Garry.
Thank you, Ricki. Pleasure to be here.
So, Garry, let's start from the beginning as we deep dive into get to know a bit about you. How old were you, Garry, when you knew that you were not like others in your families?
Look, I knew I wasn't like others in my family very, very early. That was mainly not necessarily due to my sexuality, but due to my disability.
Oh, okay.
Because I had one good leg, one bad leg, I was immediately different. That was glossed over by my family. Yes, it was part of you, but just get on with it.
Okay.
Is the way that was treated. As far as my sexuality went, most probably from about 12, I knew in my heart.
Yes.
When did I act upon it? Would have been 16-ish.
Oh, okay.
When did I actually come out? Would have been when I was officially to family, was when I was 22.
Growing up in the 60s, Garry, what was the sense of, I want to explore a little bit about disability. Was it something that was talked about? Did you see or was it something that was just, it was a no-go sort of area you had to?
Okay, I can only talk for my situation, but in my family, it was really not really talked about. It was acknowledged, but it was under the reference of everyone has something wrong with them, get over it, move on, which was a hard thing to do. But the good thing that came from that, in my belief, was that for me to accept me as me, I had to accept that part of me as well.
Okay.
So that way my parents treated it, look, my father basically ignored it. It was, oh, well, your mother will deal with that. I'll go out and work and get the money to support whatever happens, which I thought was really harsh. But the fact that I had to come to terms with me being me and having a disability as part of that basically led to the foundation in my life that to accept yourself as yourself, you've got to accept all of you, whether it's the same as or different to other people. That leading on to acknowledging my sexual orientation, it just become, well, that's part of me. I just accept it. And that helped me through my early years.
Okay.
Very much. I was really, I don't want to say hated my father's reaction, but resented his reaction. And it wasn't until I actually got 12 months study leave on full pay to retrain as a teacher for the deaf. And part of that course looked at parents and disability and everything else. Lo and behold, what did I find out? That's the typical father reaction, which I thought was abnormal, but for kids with disability, that's the norm, was the normal reaction of fathers. So that sort of helped me put his actions into place. But I still resented, even though I knew.
Growing up, did you grow up like in a country town or in a major city?
No, I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, around Granville, Parramatta area.
Okay. And what was your experience of high school?
My experience of high school started differently to most people in high school. For the first 9 months, I didn't go. That was because at the end of year 6, I actually had a leg lengthening operation, which lengthened my leg 2 inches. So that was done in November. When high school started, I was actually in full-length plaster. I went to a caliper and everything else, and I wasn't allowed to go to school. So I did homeschooling for the first 9 months. At the end of the 9 months, I went to school, and it was very interesting. Still being in a full-length caliper, being on crutches, and having to go up 2 to 3 flights of stairs to get to classes.
Oh,
Because rooms weren't adjusted for disabilities at that time.
okay.
It was just, this is where you go, off you go. I didn't have a lot of problems during high school. I was pretty lucky in that way. And again, I think because I was different for other obvious reasons, not only just sexuality. The most problem I had at high school would have been when I was in year 10, I think. Another thing you probably don't know about me. I used to do competitive ballroom dancing.
Oh, wow.
And at that stage, I actually appeared on a Channel 10 TV show, which only lasted half a season, called The International. And it was sort of a modelling competition and a ballroom dance competition. And I appeared on that. After that was when I started to get comments at school.
Okay. People making associations.
Assumptions. And, well, they weren't assumptions, they were truths. Not knowing me, they were assumptions. And, yeah, so basically I just rode through it. That was the topic of conversation for a day or two, and then it all went away.
What was it like to be involved in ballroom dancing? Do you feel that it was one way for you to show the world that, yes, I can do something, and even though my leg may be different, I can still dance like the others?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I've always, growing up, modified stuff that I did to make it fit me and the way I move. I used to water ski, but I had to do it reverse to the way other people would do it because of my leg situation. Dancing, I guess we had to modify a heck of a lot of stuff, so working off my strong leg rather than my weak leg, which was the reverse way that a male would normally dance. But yeah, it was there to prove that, hey, I can do this. And what was really good, it also, I don't want to say it was a mask, but it also allowed my gayness to come out. Because, you know, it was there. It was sequence. It was dancing. It was music. It was performing. And it just gave me another outlet. And it also, because, you know, I danced for a studio, but you ran into the same couples regularly. And it was also a way of building a group of people around you who knew you as you really were, rather than as the person you were at high school or the person you were at home. Because we're all, most of the boys that I met at that stage, we were all in the same boat. We were all gay little boys dancing with straight girls. But it was fun.
And following from that, so you've got a lot of confidence within yourself doing that and appearing on television. What happened towards the end of your schooling? Did you go up to year 12 or year 11?
Yep, went right through to year 12. At the end of year 12, I got a teacher scholarship.
Oh, okay.
Which on my mother's, well, on both sides, my mother's and father's side of the family, I was actually the first person to go into tertiary education.
Oh, okay.
In that whole huge extended family
That's wonderful.
situation. Did 3 years teacher training, again, not far from home in Western Sydney. And then went out and taught 12 months in a general primary class. Then I got a transfer up to Lake Ainsworth Sport and Rec Camp, which was an outdoor education facility. So I was there for 18 months doing outdoor ed.
You really kind of moved into that area of sport.
It was there. It was fun. While I was there, I was actually offered the 12-month scholarship to go and retrain to teach deaf children. So I had 12 months off then. And that's when my life started to change. Now, we're talking about 79. And that's when I actually met my current partner. 45 years this year it would be.
45 years. That's
Yep.
incredible.
And yeah, we met on a Tuesday. I moved in on the Saturday.
Oh.
And that's been the way it's been since then.
Now, you told us an interesting story too, like when you were going out and you came down to Sydney. And it was, you mentioned something in 1978. Do you want to sort of tell us a little bit about a special day in 1978, Garry?
Well, I think the phrase was, I just happened to be in Sydney one Saturday night in 1978. And I can even remember the bar I was in that night. It was called Flo's Palace on Oxford Street. And typical gay bar of that time, lots of noise, lots of music, lots of people. Yet we could hear over the music a rumbling from the actual street. And as the rumbling got louder and louder and louder, all of a sudden you could actually hear a chant above the music, and the DJ actually turned the music down. Forgot about that earlier. They turned it down. And all you could hear in this bar on the first floor from the street was out of the bars and into the streets, out of the bars and into the street. And the place deserted. Everybody, well, I can't say everybody. It seemed as if everybody went out to see what was happening. Oh. And of course, for those people who don't know what's significant about that night in 78, some people call it the first Mardi Gras, but it wasn't. It was a protest march, which when the police then got involved became a riot. Not sugarcoating it, that's what it ended up. And the reason I use the word riot is because it was the first time really that the LGBTQIA plus community, even though we weren't called that then, stood up for our rights in Sydney in public. So we were rioting against the discrimination, the oppression, and the fact that most of us were illegal. But it was such...
I just feel...
I just can't...
Well, see, I got goosebumps, and like the little bits of hair that's left on my neck rose up when you said that feeling. When you heard the noise, did you think it was something like you're going to be attacked, or because it obviously was a very foreign thing to hear? I
had no idea what was happening. And then just to get down onto the footpath and see this mass of people on the street stopping traffic. You know, they weren't on the footpaths, they were walking up the middle of Oxford Street, which is the Mardi Gras route now, of course.
And did you know it was like a queer march or LGBTIQ march? Like, how did you know it was our community out?
That's a really odd I don't know, to be honest. Yes, I saw a couple of people I knew in it, walking past. And then all of a sudden, when you started really looking at, instead of looking at the mob of people, looking at individuals, I think, you're my people. You're us. And there was other chants that were happening as well, but it's the out of the bars into the streets that really hit home for me, and that's my biggest memory. Yeah, all of a sudden you're seeing drag queens walking up the street and you're thinking, well, yeah, that's my community. That's my people. And I joined them. When it got to the end down near Darlinghurst Police Station, I was so far away from the cameras and everything else. You know, I can never prove that I was there. That's just this, I know.
Yeah.
I can't claim to be a 78er because I've got no proof of being there. But by the time it got to Darlinghurst and the time where I got in the crush, in the mob, I was well away from the really, really rough stuff.
Okay.
You could see it. I could see it happening, but I was well away from it. But the brilliant thing in Sydney now, that police station is being turned into a gay museum, which is a brilliant final resting place for that building. This is what happened. this is what it is now. So we went from a place that opposed our community to now a place that's honouring our community. If you live long enough, you see change, and that's a huge change to be seen.
Do you think that was a changing point in your life, seeing that at that time?
I don't know whether I want to say it was changing, but it was definitely affirming. It cast in concrete who I am and who I saw myself as being. So yeah, more affirming than changing. It didn't change who I thought I was, yet affirmed who I am.
So with that journey on that night and you went home, what was the kind of the thought that left you that stayed with you from that event?
Being visible is important. That was the first time I would say that I actually pushed my sexuality. Up until that point, and even after that for a while, it was a matter of I don't push it, I don't deny it. But yeah, it did change. Sorry, just in reflection, it did change because it changed the way I saw things more. I had less of a fear of presenting to the world who I was.
And meeting Les was an important point in your life. What was life in the early years with Les like?
Interesting. Les is 10 years older than I am. But when we met, he was actually going through divorce and custody. So for the first 12 months, we were fighting. He wasn't fighting his divorce, but he was going through that whole divorce process and going through a whole custody case with his kid. To cut quick to the chase, yes, his divorce went through. We actually got a gay solicitor at that time who unfortunately sold him out because Les was saying, yep, let the divorce go, but as far as custody, I want prescribed access to the kids. But what actually happened was the solicitor let the divorce go. He rang up and said, oh, you divorced one morning at 9 o'clock. Your divorce is being up today. Les said, do I have to be there? He said, no, we'll just get it adjourned. At 1 o'clock, we got a phone call from him saying, the divorce is through and you have some access at your wife's discretion with the kids, which was totally against what we wanted, or what we were fighting for. Most probably we were fighting with our heads against a brick wall at the time. And looking back in retrospect, we probably would never have got that anyway. But we still had that feeling of being nobbled at the knees and let down. So his relationship with his kids was controlled by his wife. His wife didn't and couldn't come to terms with the fact that he was gay, so we didn't get to see the kids.
What about your work journey? You mentioned that so you did teaching for a while, and then you got an interesting role.
I left teaching, and the reason I left teaching was because after 12 years teaching hearing impaired children, I wanted to go back into a mainstream classroom for 12 months just to get my levels back. I knew what a high-functioning hearing impaired child could do, but I was losing contact with what mainstream kids, normal kids. After 3 years, I kept on being knocked back, so I actually resigned.
What do you feel that was anything to do with your sexuality, or?
That was my decision, and that wasn't to do with my sexuality. While I was teaching, I actually applied to, at that stage, it was called Go on the List, which was to become a deputy and all that sort of thing. Twice, I actually went through the assessment process. Each time, the inspector that did that came back to me at the end and said, we don't have any more places for men on the list. We've only got female places left.
Oh.
That was then back at the time of Affirmative action
Affirmative action,
for women.
Oh, okay.
So 40% of the places went for men, 60% went to women.
Okay.
And he'd done his quota.
Right.
He said, if it wasn't for that, you get there. So after me sort of not being able to get my boundaries right, I quit. And then we ended up in Coffs Harbour, where we actually had a charcoal chicken shop and a fruit and veg shop, which was 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Hard work. Finally got out of them. Then we moved up to Queensland, and I actually got the role to actually set up a community-based organisation who had funding for community transport. So when I started with community transport, I had no idea. Last thing I knew anything about. I actually went to the interview, and in the middle of the interview they said, these are the vehicles you've got. You've got this bus with a wheelchair lift. You've got this person in a wheelchair living here and all these other people, and they've all got to be at this place at the same time. Who would you pick up and what order would you pick them up in? And I'd only been in Brisbane 3 weeks. And I had to say in the middle of the interview, sorry, I haven't got a clue where any of these places are. You've got a street directory so I can check it up and see if I can answer the question, and went home and said, nah, didn't get that. 2 days later, I got the call for, you've got the job. So it started off with just myself and a bus driver. After 12 years, we had, that organisation was actually running a multiple programs, both transport and socialisation for older people, which was all funded from, at that stage, through home and community care. Across the entire organisation, a volunteer base of 104 people. And at that stage, we were actually the largest community transport operator in Australia.
When you look back now on accessible transport and you compare it to now, living in Melbourne in 2024, what parallels do you see from your time there and the problems or the gaps we are facing now in 2024 when it comes to providing accessible transport?
The biggest problem I see in Melbourne, and it's no surprise to anyone else, trams. There are so many trams that run down the middle of a road that aren't and will never have accessible stops. The only way that's going to change, and I'm talking about the trams that run down Burwood Highway through Kew and all that sort of place. The only way that's going to happen is for the tram lines to be dug up and moved over to the curb.
Oh, okay.
Because even if you put an accessible stop in the middle of the road, you're going to be blocking traffic. And if you don't block traffic, you're creating one hell of a hazard for a person with mobility problems to get from the curb into the centre. So it's the retrofit problem. The good thing that I do see is that there is a lot of pluses. Things have changed drastically. We have low floor buses. We have accessible buses. Dare I say we do have accessible taxis. Whether you can get one or not when you need, it's another question, but we do have them. Unfortunately, not all our taxis are accessible. The highly identifiable black cabs in London, every single one of them is accessible. They don't look like an accessible vehicle, but they can and do take wheelchairs. We don't do that here, which I still feel is wrong. You look in America at the times when I was doing that sort of stuff, there was, with the Americans with Disability Act, there was the mandatory provision that any bus operator had to operate a parallel service for people with disability. So if you were 2 blocks, 3 blocks away from the bus stop and couldn't get there, they had to provide transport, accessible transport for you to get to your destination. That never happened over here. We've come a long way. A lot of work's been done, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
One of the exciting things, Garry, that I've been the pleasure of knowing you for a few years is your work with Housing for the Aged Action Group. Can you tell us a little bit about your role there?
With Housing for the Aged Action Group, or HAAG, I'm a member of the LGBTIQAA+ reference group. It was a joy for me to find out about this group.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found out about this group was at a HAAG conference in Melbourne, maybe a couple of years ago now, where Fiona York, the CEO, and one of the reference group people actually presented a paper, which was basically one of the three lone voices in the whole 3 days of conference that mentioned LGBTQIA+ people. And at the end of that, I actually went up to Fiona and said, "Do you have volunteers at your organisation?" And that led me to becoming on that group. And actually becoming a member of that group was a revelation to me, because it's every member on that group is not just a voice. There's action behind the voice. So it's not just a group of people having a talk fest. Whatever we talk about, everyone in the group has the desire to put action behind the plans, which I find really great. And the organisation itself listens to us. Yes, we were started by the organisation to comply for their Rainbow Tick accreditation, which I applaud them hugely for doing it. For a non-LGBTQIA+ organisation to go for it, a big thing. So they did set it up to comply with that, but they still listen to us. What our recommendations for the organisation, how they treat, how they respond to, how they welcome people of our community, comes from this reference group fed back into the organisation. If there's any questions or concern that staff have about things, they come to us for solutions. The biggest problem with the group at the moment is we're not that well known in our community. And I feel that's the major hurdle that's facing the reference group and HAAG in particular, into getting and letting people know that housing is a right for everybody. HAAG and the reference group actually did a survey. 17% of the people that responded to the survey, and these are older people, were actually homeless at the time. There's not 17% of the heteronormative community that's homeless. 40-something% also stated that at least once in their lifetime they had been homeless. They're huge figures. And they're figures, and it's a group in the homeless section or the at-risk section that we don't hear anybody talking about it. Yes, we do hear that the largest rising group is female, is women over a certain age. And yes, that is true. But we as a community also have significant issues that is not being looked at and not being taken into consideration.
Garry, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today on Quest by Community. If there's one thing that you would like the listeners to consider or think about Garry, what would that be?
I honestly believe that I'm a person standing on the shoulders of the people who went before me. What we do and what has been changed in my lifetime, yes, I've been active in lots of things, has only happened because I've stood on other people's shoulders. What we're advocating for HAAG and in lots of other places, people need to now stand on, well, not now. People need to work with us, and when we're gone, they need to stand on our shoulders to consolidate what we've been doing. It's the only way change will happen.
Garry, it's been an absolute
Thanks,
pleasure,
Del.
my darling. This is Ricki Spencer, and thank you for listening to Quest by Community.